when you got married, you met your wife, you married her, this woman. Was it hard for you not to compare to what all the past videotapes? Because those don't just go away; they don't just
No.
disappear. Especially if you had years of pornography. Because I think young men that have been watching it, and then one day they find that woman, they fall in love, they get married, and it's like, oh wait, our sex life doesn't look like it did on the screen. Because
Yeah.
that's pretend. That's
Yes.
performance, right? And so
Yeah.
they're disappointed or, it's not, they can't get to that same level of arousal.
Yep.
And isn't it hard not to compare? I mean,
Definitely.
real person to what you saw?
I'm-
So, hey, everybody, welcome to the Daniele Hage Podcast. I'm so excited today to bring to you Sathiya Sam. He is my guest today, and I was on his podcast a while back. I'm not really sure how we got connected, but I know we have some common people, some friends in common through the podcast world. But anyway, so what Sathiya does, well, I'm going to let you introduce what you do. So I don't know the correct title for you, but why don't you go ahead and start and just tell us your story?
Yeah, well, thanks so much for having me, Danielle. You gave a phenomenal interview on my show, The Man Within, and I'm hoping I can do the same here for your audience. A little bit of background about me. So my work, I work with men specifically, and I help men with pornography addiction. So it's a very kind of niche area. I've been helping guys for a long time in this space. We've served thousands of men from around the world. And when we first started, I guess, 6 years ago, pornography still to this day is a very taboo subject, but it was much more taboo back then. I think the narrative is starting to change. People are starting to be a little bit more open. We are all very aware of just how ubiquitous pornography is. And now people are starting to become aware of how insidious pornography is, the kind of damage it does to the brain, the body, and relationships, of course, which I know you talk about a lot in your different spaces. So it's become a very important subject. And it's funny, whether it's fitness, relationships, personal development, there's a conversation to be had about pornography and its impact. And so that's kind of my work and what I'm all about.
Wow. Okay. So go back to how did you, if you don't mind sharing, how personally how old were you when you first saw pornography? How was it introduced to you? Did you find it? Did you stumble upon it? Did somebody tell you about it? How did it start with you?
I was exposed to pornography in the computer lab of my Christian school when I was 11 years old.
Oh my
Yeah,
goodness.
2001. So before broadband internet, before the smartphone, it was still readily accessible even back then. And I think it happened through like a very innocent sounding website. It's still a pornographic website today, so I won't mention it. But I think my friend knew what it was, but he kind of pretended he didn't. And I had never seen anything like that before in my life. I was totally shocked, almost a little bit appalled by it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was just starting to enter puberty, and it definitely planted a seed that I kind of came back to later. So by the time I was in high school, I was watching regularly. In university is where I would say I was addicted myself. I mean, I literally planned my days around it. It was the thing I looked forward to the most. At the end of the day, I was very studious, very academic. I had 5 figures in research grants, and so I worked in a lab while I did my undergrad, and I volunteered, and I had a part-time job, and pornography was sort of the thing that kind of kept my life together, as weird as that sounds. And I told myself I could always quit, this is just my thing. I'm young and I'm a bit reckless and I'll figure it out one day. And then that day came, where I kind of decided I was going to commit my life to Jesus. I was going to get my life in order. And I knew that with that came a series of lifestyle changes that I had to make. And I stopped getting drunk with my friends, and I cleaned up my language, and I knew I needed to quit watching porn. And those first 2 things were no problem, but I could not. I think I went maybe 2 days, 3 days, and that was when it hit me. Like, this is a way bigger problem than I realized. And I spent the next 6 years of my life trying to get pornography out. I spent the first 3 years doing a lot of wrong things. I didn't know they were wrong because, like I said, no one was talking about this stuff back in the day. And then, I started to understand what actually moves the needle forward, what actually makes a difference. And that changed my life. I had my last relapse in February 2016. And like I said, we haven't looked back since, trying to help as many other people as possible get free of pornography as well.
So during that time, first of all, how did you know you were addicted? How did you know you didn't have any control? Like, it controlled you? What were the signs?
The biggest revelation for me was when I tried to quit and I couldn't. So that's, I think, when I realized, okay, again, I would say I was in denial about it being an addiction at that point.
Mm.
But that's when I said, oh, wow, this is a bigger problem. But then, you try internet filters, you get kind of an accountability partner, you pray it through, you pray the deliverance prayers, you do whatever. And then a year later, 2 years later, you're still struggling just as much.
Oh, wow.
And that then it starts to like become this reality that you cannot deny. This is an addiction. Like I do not know how to get out. And all of the behavioral tactics that have gotten me this far in life are not working.
Wow. So how did you get free? What was the straw that broke this camel's back? I mean, what made
I think the best way I could explain it is, when I was a teenager, one of my responsibilities around the home was I had to cut the grass. And so my parents have a big backyard. I always kind of dreaded it, but you do it because you have to. There was this one area of their yard that was a little bit of grass, but mostly weeds. And it always bothered me because I knew that if I really wanted this area to look clean, I actually I can't just run it over with the lawnmower. I have to put on some gloves, uproot the weeds, and then replant some grass. And I was just a lazy teenager and I never did it. So I would cut the grass, everything looked clean for a couple days. But as we know, those weeds are going to grow back thicker, pricklier than ever. And my solution was just keep running over with the lawnmower. And that's literally what I did for the first 3 years of recovery. I was just trying to figure out, how do I modify this behavior as quickly and painlessly as possible? That's why an internet filter was so attractive, because it's a low barrier to entry. It costs $10 a month, and it's quick and easy. But at the end of the day, you're dealing with the behavior at kind of the surface level. And what actually pushed the needle forward for me was when I was willing to get to the roots of the issue. That's where the heart changes, where you start to build emotional awareness, where you start to build better strategies for coping with stress, where your belief systems start to change and you start to separate yourself from your behavior and realize that you're something bigger than that. Yeah. That's when things really start to shift for me. And I would say those are the principles. And then the other critical component was I had healthy community. I had a group of really close guy friends that I could share really openly with about struggles in this area, but then also just the general challenges that came up in life. Yeah. And there's this adage in our space that the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, it's connection. Mm-hmm. And that was absolutely true of my experience as well.
Did you have girlfriends during this time, like in high school and in college? Did they have any idea that you were watching pornography? Or?
Yeah, actually, I really had one serious relationship in university, and it came up probably 3 or 4 months into the relationship. And she was sort of like, oh, why do you do that? And I kind of said, I don't know. I've just done it for a really long time. And she basically said, well, I would like you to stop. And I did stop. The rest of the time that we were together, I stopped, but we were sexually active in that relationship. So it was almost like I just replaced one thing with the other. And other than that, I had a lot of shame around my addiction. And I also was people knew me as someone who had their life relatively put together. I was a pastor's kid and, all that kind of stuff. So I really struggled to date. I was hesitant to date because I didn't want to be exposed. I didn't want to be found out. Yeah. So I stayed single for a really long time. And then it was actually shortly after I quit porn that I met my wife.
So if a man is getting his sexual need met with his partner, his wife or girlfriend, is he less likely to watch porn, or is it still there? Like, does he still want that? Even he still wants it.
Yeah, there's no sorry, and I'll backtrack because I realized what I just shared about my story could be contradictory. The reason that for me, being sexually active with my girlfriend at the time replaced pornography is because the reason I was watching pornography was for intimacy, connection, and honestly, a slight degree of rebellion. Mm-hmm. It was like the forbidden fruit. Yeah. And I was kind of getting all those things met artificially in this relationship. That wasn't really much of a relationship. It became very physical. So I think when you talk to a married guy, the classic thing that we hear married guys say is, I knew it was a problem when I was single, but I thought once I got married, I'm having sex with one person, it's a healthy, committed relationship, I won't go to pornography. Right. And that would be true if the reasons we watch pornography were sexual in nature. but typically they're not.
Mm.
Typically, the reasons we watch pornography are actually much more to do with fundamental human relationship needs: connection, comfort, safety, a sense of being wanted. Those are the things that drive people to pornography. And if you don't find ways to meet those needs healthy, whether you're in a relationship or not, pornography is going to be a very viable option for you.
So do you think that stems from childhood? Like you didn't get the physical touch or the nurturing or the comforting or the care from your caregiver, your parents, or is that, I mean, because if so many men watch it, I mean, is there something that's lacking from childhood, or are they connected?
It's all connected for sure. I think if you ask the typical guy who has some degree of emotional awareness, he'll tell you that I watch pornography when I'm lonely. I watch pornography when I'm stressed. I watch pornography when, there's disconnection. My wife and I get into a fight, or my wife turned me down for sex. I think guys can pinpoint those sort of catalytic events, but you hit the nail on the head. I think when we start getting deeper with our clients, we're very fond of a particular modality called inner child work. All of our coaches are certified in it. We really see the strength of it. And what inner child work typically reveals is there are childhood dynamics at play that have kind of driven our sexual development and eventually our sexual behavior.
Mhm.
And I would be the quintessential example of that. So I mentioned I grew up in a pastor's home.
Yeah.
I had a very good upbringing. A lot of people are like, oh, pastor's kid, so sorry for you. That was not my experience. Like, I had amazing parents. They were same people on and off the stage. They were reliable, like nothing to complain about. My mom, an incredible woman, but not a very expressive woman, a little bit more timid, a bit more shy. And so she showed love by doing stuff, and she was great that way, but she wasn't very verbally affectionate and not very physically affectionate. So I sort of grew up with this lingering sense of neglect. Now, again, these are not things I could have articulated as a child or even as an adolescent. This was part of my recovery journey where I realized, I never had the language before, but I was working with a specialist and they kind of helped me pinpoint, there was a sense of neglect. And then it sort of started to make sense. Well, if I had this sort of maternal wound and the sense of neglect, that has to be compensated for somehow. And so it was chasing girls, when I was maybe a more innocent boy. And then it was pornography. And it became a deeper and deeper thing as I started to develop, sexually and become an adult.
Right.
And so working through that pain, forgiving my mom, even just being able to label the dynamic, I'm telling you, for me, recovery was mostly incremental. It was a lot of small changes that added up over time. The day I forgave my mom, it was like night and day. Like, I felt like a different person when I walked out. Like, I felt like I was in control of my life again, my inner world.
Wow.
So I cannot understate how important addressing more, wounds of the past and trauma from the past is for somebody who really wants to make a lasting recovery.
Yes. Okay, so let me play devil's advocate for a minute, because I've
Please.
heard people ask these kinds of questions. So can porn, and I'm going to say about 3 or 4 questions, okay? Because they kind of all go together. And then, excuse me. Can porn be helpful for couples who been married a long time and their sex life's gotten kind of dry, kind of boring? Isn't it just titillation? What's wrong with that? And if the marriage bed is undefiled and both, partners agree and watch it together, is that okay?
Okay. Great questions. I think I can answer them both probably with one simple concept. So, does pornography improve a sex life? Does it add excitement? Does it actually show even an improvement in just the reported relationship quality? Yes. The answer is yes. The research and the data would suggest that. There's a caveat, okay? So when you look at the research, and I like I mentioned, I was a university researcher, so it is a huge part of what we integrate in our work. The research would suggest that when couples are struggling in their sex life and they introduce pornography, the sexual satisfaction goes through the roof. And the relationship quality improves as well. And that's especially true when the couples are watching it together. If it's just one person watching, not really. The data doesn't really stack up there. The key caveat or the quality that we need to ask about this research is for how long. And so in the short term, the data would suggest watching pornography will strengthen your sexual relationship. But if we look at any longitudinal studies over the course of 3 to 6 months and beyond,
Mm-hmm.
the results are the complete opposite. Because what happens over time is the sexual satisfaction becomes a lot lower. The relationship quality starts to deteriorate. And I have two explanations for it. This is my own speculation. The research is still developing on it. Number one is, from a male perspective, you are basically being programmed to experience arousal from somebody other than your partner.
Mm-hmm.
So initially it's exciting because the whole concept, what drives people sexually more than anything else, is novelty. Novelty is a beautiful thing. And novelty is actually, it's a great way to improve your sex life. But if your novelty is around something that involves another person, you've introduced a third party, if you will. Well, what happens when that couple gets into a fight? Maybe the guy makes a move, the woman turns him down. Well, he has pornography, and he's been programmed to get aroused by pornography.
Right.
It's not that he doesn't need his partner, it's just that he has other options.
Right.
The second thing that happens, though, is this concept that I call your arousal threshold. When you watch pornography, and this is very common now in younger men, a lot of young men are experiencing erectile dysfunction. Like the rate of erectile dysfunction in men under the age of 40 was 5% in 2001. That's pretty standard. Today, it's reported to be as high as 30%.
Wow.
So the reason for this escalation is because when you watch pornography, pornography is hyper-produced sexual content, and it starts to change what is required for you to experience arousal. And so what happens over longer periods of time when pornography is in the mix is eventually an experience with a regular person doesn't add up.
Right.
Because it's not as stimulating as the pornography that people are watching. And then you think about, if you're married for 10, 20 years, you guys get used to doing the same things. You don't have that novelty, and maybe you don't have that emotional connection, because that's actually where you get the novelty in your relationship as time goes on more than anything else.
Right.
Eventually, pornography starts to become a lot more appealing, but it actually erodes the sex life as a result.
Well, and I think pornography, wouldn't it short circuit the intimacy that you have with your partner? Because part of the sex and making love is the foreplay, is the touching and the caressing and the kissing and whispering
Yes.
sweet nothings. But if you're watching pornography together, it's an instant arousal,
Yeah.
right? So
Yes.
you don't have to do any of that with each other. Like,
And you know
being
what?
aroused by watching other people.
There's an even greater layer to this. I remember one time I was traveling with some friends. We went to a friend's wedding. My wife and I had been married for about 3 weeks, and we were traveling there was 8 of us. We were the only married couple. So everyone else is single, or there was one other couple that were dating. And so we all went to church together and all that kind of stuff. So the couple that was dating, they were sleeping in separate rooms. Like it was very peaceable. They were honoring their boundaries.
Yeah.
And we were getting ready for the wedding, I remember. And we're in front of a mirror. The guys are doing their ties. And my wife came in, and she had bought this new dress for the wedding she was really excited about. And she said, "Hey, babe, how do I look?" And I turned around and I said, "Babe, you look amazing." And she just had the smile on her face, and she walked back and kept getting ready with the girls. And I nudged my buddy. I said, "You see that? This is the guy who was dating. He was getting ready to pop the question." I said, "Do you see that? That's foreplay." And we were dying.
True.
We thought it was hilarious.
So true.
But it's true, right? The emotional connection is actually the most important part of a healthy sexual relationship.
Yes.
And you're absolutely right. When people watch pornography, this research was done more in men, but their capacity for empathy is actually reduced. Like I don't know how much you're in attachment theory, but they're literally the physiological pathways in their body that are responsible for attachment, they start to shut down, or they at the very least, they're going to reduce. And so you will see that over time. The reason the relationship quality suffers when people watch pornography, whether it's one guy watching pornography on his own, it's a couple watching pornography together, whatever it is they literally start to lose their capacity for empathy for one another, and the emotional connection starts to disappear.
Wow. Okay, wait. There was another question I was going to ask. Oh, let me bring it back. What was it? Oh, I'll think about it. It'll come up in me. But
Okay.
Okay. Let's see. Let me see what else I wrote down here. Okay. Well. Okay. So, you said you worked with a professional for you to get free and go through the process. Do you now have your own process for men that come to you? Have you developed your own thing? of how to get men free?
Yeah. So in
Before
December.
you answer that, I just thought of the question.
Okay. Yep.
So do men like, okay, let's say for you, even if you're willing to share this, when you got married, you met your wife, you married her, this woman, was it hard for you not to compare to what all the past videotapes, because those don't just go away, they don't just
No.
disappear, especially if you had years of pornography? Because I think young men that have been watching it, and then one day they find that woman, they fall in love, they get married, and it's like, oh wait, our sex life doesn't look like it did on the screen, because
Yeah.
that's pretend. That's
Yes.
performance, right? And so
Yeah.
they're disappointed, or it's not, they can't get to that same level of arousal.
Yep.
And isn't it hard not to compare? I mean, a real
Definitely.
person to what you saw?
I mean, so when I got married, like I said, I was sexually active in a previous relationship, but we were just kind of fooling around. When I married my wife, I mean, my wedding night, that was the first time I had ever properly had sex. And I just remember, even leading up to the night, just not really understanding what to expect. I knew that pornography was not right. I knew it was like, it was exaggerated, it's produced.
Right.
At that point, I hadn't watched pornography in, I guess, about 2.5 years. But all I knew about sex, all my sex education came from the thousands of videos that I had watched as a teenager and a young adult.
Yeah.
So it was a challenge for sure. And I had a lot of performance insecurity, not quite performance anxiety. So I made all these jokes like leading up to our wedding day where I was like, hey babe, I hope you're ready for the best 30 seconds of your life and all this kind of stuff. And honestly, like it was funny, admittedly, like I love making those jokes.
Yeah.
But if I'm being frank, it was actually because I felt so insecure because all the pornography videos I saw were 20, 25 minutes. And like there's all these expectations around what my body's supposed to look like and
Right.
how I'm supposed to engage. And I really felt the pressure of it. So yeah, it definitely messed me up that way. I've been clean for 8.5 years now. I would say most areas of my life, there's not really any indicator that I was ever addicted to pornography. Like it's been an amazing journey for me. I would say the thing I'm still plagued by at times, though, is an overactive imagination that was developed from watching pornography. So that is something that I still have to guard against. It's gotten a lot better with time, but it is still there. There's remnants of it for sure.
And again, this is really personal, and I know I'm asking you to speak for your wife, but did she have any hesitation about am I going to be enough for him because of what his past was? Will I be able to please him? Like, did you guys have those conversations?
Yeah, definitely. I think that again, it kind of the same side or different side of the same coin. Like a lot of body insecurity, because we all know like the bodies in pornography are perfect, right? They're perfect in every way, top to bottom. So I think that was a big thing for her. We did have some conversations about it prior to, but let's not kid ourselves. Like until you're actually engaging sexually, you're not really going to have the most robust conversations. So we did talk about it more. We've been really fortunate. Like we've had a really good sex life. I would say pornography has, if it's had any negative impact, it's been nominal. But again, I was fortunate. Like I had been clean of pornography for multiple years by the time we were having sex. So a little bit of a different experience that way, but definitely still that dynamic. Yep.
Yeah. So how, when men come to you, can you I know this is probably too lengthy, but can you summarize, what's the process you use with men?
Yeah.
To say, I want to bring.
Yeah, everything stems back to what we discussed earlier. It's we help guys get to the roots of their pornography addiction. And
is it always different for everybody, or is there a common thread?
It's both.
Okay.
It's both. So when I talk about root issues, that's always the $1 million question is like, well, what are my root issues or what's a root issue? So all root issues fall into 3 buckets. The first bucket is self-awareness. The second bucket is trauma and kind of transformation of the heart. And the third bucket is identity. So any root issue that comes up, I can pretty much categorize it into one of those 3 areas. That's sort of the general principle. That's the deep clean system that I started in December 2018 that has helped, over 10,000 people quit pornography.
Gosh. Oh, that's awesome. Wow.
It's a really effective system. And like I said, we integrate research. I pastored for 10 years, so we integrate a lot of principles of scripture. It's become really, really proficient that way. However, there is individual nuances. I shared the story about my mother and that being kind of a piece of my trauma history. But for some people, their trauma history is very different. Sometimes it is more obvious, like they were sexually abused, or they had these really harmful sexual experiences when they were young. Sometimes it's an absent father. I mean, there's nuances to everyone's story. And same with self-awareness and identity. All those pieces, there's always common threads. And again, once you work with so many clients, you start to you can see where things are going.
Yeah.
But I'm still always surprised because every single person's story is different, and their sexual palettes or their sexual, their arousal template, those things are all very unique to the individual. And so yeah, I'm still always coming in with an open mind because there is an individual variance that exists from one person to the next.
Yeah. Wow. And something I'd learned, I think this goes way, way back. You remember James Dobson?
Of course.
Okay. And he did a big report on pornography way back, 25, maybe 30 years ago.
Yes.
And I remember, reading it or hearing about it. And does it, because it's like pornography, like any addiction, a drug or an alcohol, it's progressive. Pretty soon what you have right now gets you to a certain level, but now you need more because it's not working anymore. So you need more and more and more. And I think it was in his report, and correct me if I'm wrong, that, it's like it has to get naughtier and nastier and dirtier. And all the way, a lot of times it leads to child pornography. Because what's more innocent than a child, and what's more naughtier than, going all that way. So, and his report, I think and again, I don't know if it came from him or somebody else, but it was like that, how demonic it really is, because it just leads you down this rabbit hole into like just the dirtiest, grossest.
It's death by 1,000 paper cuts. Yeah. Now, I don't know about the timing of that report. That's very interesting you brought that up, because the greatest example of this is going to be a bit extreme, okay, but this will really get the point across. There was a gentleman named Ted Bundy. I'm sure that name means something to you. One of the world's most notorious serial killers of all time. And there's 29 documented cases of him abducting, raping, and murdering women. 29 documented cases. So he got the death penalty. And before he was executed, he had thousands of media requests. Obviously, this was a big story at the time. This was like a global phenomenon. He only agreed to one interview, and it was with James Dobson. Oh. And so this is, I don't know, 2 days, 3 days before. And, James asked him point blank, he just said, what do you attribute the most to this kind of behavior? Like, Ted Bundy was a lawyer. Like, this guy was a professional, well-to-do gentleman who just had a completely second life that was dark and insidious in every sense of the word. And Ted said, he said, I can't speak for everyone, but he said, I've been in a maximum security prison, and I can tell you 90% of the guys, they would say the same thing. A lot of our misbehavior, we can all point back to pornography.
Wow.
And he said, I watched pornography. It was my dirty little secret. It was sort of a fun thing. And then the stuff I watched wasn't as thrilling. So then I started to kind of watch more intense content. And then that wasn't thrilling after a while. So then I started to seek in-person sexual experiences. That wasn't thrilling enough. And eventually, like, you just keep pushing the envelope, trying to chase that high, trying to chase that thrill. Yeah. Yeah. And again, is everybody who watches pornography going to become a notorious serial killer? Of course not. But the concept is there. And there's even science to back this up. It's a process called desensitization, where what you're accustomed to no longer is thrilling. And so you naturally seek novelty. And Danielle, if I can be honest with you, most clients that we serve, most people come to us because their behavior escalated to a point that scared them. It's a single guy who went to a massage parlor. It's a married man who had an affair or joined a chat room or got an OnlyFans account. It's, I started texting that coworker and things just got out of hand. Like, it's always the escalation in trying to seek that same thrill that eventually makes people, well, either their lives fall apart because of the consequences of their decision, or the wiser ones, I guess I would say, have that wherewithal to realize, man, this is becoming a problem. I got to nip this thing in the bud ASAP.
Right. Wow. Okay. Well, we're going to wrap it up. We're out of time, but thank you so much. This is really interesting. And I know a lot of people don't want to hear about it. They don't want to talk about it. It's just too intense for a lot of people. And I think probably for men, maybe women. Do women get addicted to porn, or is it more
Yes.
men?
Yeah.
Have you
Yeah.
taken women through the process? You
We
personally?
have not.
Okay.
We've kept it male focused for now.
Okay.
We definitely will be serving women at some point. We're just not there yet. But the again, the stats show that the viewership is about 2 to 1. For every 2 men watching pornography, there's a woman watching. So
I'm
women are
surprised there's
definitely,
even that many.
yeah.
I wouldn't
33%
know.
of all viewers are female. So
Oh,
it's definitely a rising issue there.
okay. So how can people find you?
Okay, so I want to say one more thing just before
Okay.
I answer that question,
Okay.
because we've talked a lot about how pornography affects you, the kind of dark path it can take you down, and I've shared a bit of my story. What I want your audience to hear more than anything else is it doesn't matter if you've tried to quit 1,000 times. It doesn't matter if your wife is about to walk out the door and she's ready to leave you. You can change. Pornography addiction is overcomable, and I have seen too many people quit pornography to think any differently. I am convinced without the shadow of a doubt. And again, we've worked with professional athletes. We had an addictions physician come through our program. I mean, he literally went to school for 10 years to help guys with addiction, and he could not figure out how to quit pornography.
Oh
We
my
helped him through it.
gosh.
We've helped college students, accountants, engineers, tech people. I mean, the list goes on and on. Young and old, rich and poor, everything in between, great childhoods, bad childhoods. Literally nobody is out of reach from these concepts and these principles if you take them really seriously.
Wow.
And I want your audience to hear that. It doesn't matter what your situation is. I guarantee you freedom is possible for you. If people want to get a start on that, the first place I'd recommend is my book. So we took this system, all the tools that we talked about. If people want them in greater depth, my book is called The Last Relapse, and you can get a free copy of it at thelastrelapsebook.com. That's just my gift to the world. We want as many people as possible to go through this system and be impacted by it. And if you are in a more serious situation, or you just can see where your path is going and you want to nip things in the bud and be wise about this, then book a call with our team, and we'll listen to more to your situation. There's a little video that you can watch first that explains. I'll give you the link that kind of explains our system, and if it looks like a good fit, book a call. We'd love to speak with you and see if we can help out.
Sathiya, that is awesome. I love that. That gives so much hope. It gives people hope to know that it's doable. And
Yes.
because I know there's so much shame around it, which keeps
Yeah.
you hidden and silent. But like you said, you've gotten so many tens of thousands of men free. So that's very inspiring, and it just brings hope for people. So thank you. I really
Thank you so much
appreciate
for
you
having me. And thanks for the
answering my
work you're
question.
doing.
Yes, and
Yeah.
thank you. I think you are so brave. I really do. I told you that on our interview last time, that I just think for you to come out and just open up and share with the world your story, I just think it's very, very courageous of you. So,
Oh, thank you so much. And thanks for having me. This was a
okay.
pleasure.
Thank you. Till next time.